So here is some data, macroeconomics, U.S. macroeconomics data from 1959 to 2009. 203 observations, 14 variables. I don't know that much about macroeconomics, but it's all from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, okay? And we got the real GDP, real personal consumption. Let me zoom in a little bit for you guys, okay? Private domestic investment, federal consumption expenditures, disposable income, consumer price index, M1, nominal money stock. I have no idea what these things are, okay? Like, how are they? I don't know how the government measures these things. Like I know what GDP is, but how does the government even figure this out? I don't know, okay? So someone somewhere is recording these values, although I don't know. Does anyone know the methodology? Like anytime they publish GDP numbers, does anyone know how this is even estimated? Is it complicated? Okay. So someone's figuring it out, and I guess we just can rely and trust him. Is it trustworthy for every nation though? This is my question. Like you'll get GDP numbers for all of these countries around the world, and some of these countries are really small or large but don't have excellent infrastructure. So I always question how accurate are these GDP values that are coming out. I'm not sure. Okay, but anyway, let's take a look. All right, so it says we got 203 entries. All right, the index is by default. I didn't specify anything here, right? So by default, we get a range index 0 to 202, okay? And then 203, no missing values, right? Everything, all columns are complete, which is nice. But I guess that's what you might expect when you're getting something from U.S. macroeconomic data, okay? Compiled by Skipper Siebold, and okay, but let's do that, and we'll just go ahead and take a look at the top thing. All right, so we got year 1959.0, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and it gives us the GDP and the consumer whatever and investment and government and CPI and whatever. Okay, or consumption. Consumption expenditures. What is defined as consumption expenditures? I don't know. Okay. Okay. This, when we look at this, okay, each thing is kind of identified by the year and the quarter, right? So we've got basically Q1 of 1959. I'm gonna sneeze here. Maybe not. Okay. And so on and so forth. And we can create something called a period index, okay? So you're going to generate indices based on certain period intervals, okay? And so, you know, again, I cannot expect anybody to memorize all of the functions that exist in pandas, okay? So you're going to have to get used to reading documentation and learning from the documentation. You're going to have to be able to type into Google, how do I do this in pandas? It's going to give you some names of functions that you might want to try out, and you click one, you read the documentation, and you got to be able to figure that out, okay? So when you do this, you're going to get an immutable ND array holding ordinal values indicating regular periods, okay? And you've got things, different things. It tells us, you know, stuff that's been deprecated, so we might get some stuff. But basically, we're going to say we're going to take this column, year, data.year, and say that is going to be the year in our index, and then data.quarter will go into the quarter for the index, okay? Now, there's other things. If you don't have quarter information, you can specify the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, the second, and it can create periods accordingly, okay? You've got different arguments here and stuff, or examples. All right, so I'll go ahead and do this, and it creates an index, and we can see it creates 1959 Q1, 1959 Q2, 1959 Q3. Okay. Here I'm going to create a new index for the columns. All right, and I'm going to just select real GDP, the inflation, and the unemployment things. Okay. There's a few ways we could do this, but I'm going to just specify an index here. Okay, and so here basically I just get a list, but now it's an index because I've thrown it in there. Right. And what I will do here is I will re-index the data using these columns that I specified. Okay, so that will force the this data set to kind of conform to this index that I've specified. Okay, and so now we only have these things here. Okay. You know, we could have also selected via you know, something like location to just specify the columns. So there's a few ways to do it. Okay. And then here, another thing I'm going to do is these periods, which is currently the period index, instead of leaving it as 1959 Q1, I'm going to turn them into to date times. Okay, so I'm going to change this to timestamp, and you can specify that you want it at the start, but you can also kind of do end, and this will do the last day. Okay, the last part. So this will be, you know, March 31st at basically midnight, 11:59:59 is the end of the period of quarter one of 1959, and end of quarter two in 1959 is June 30th, end of the third quarter is September 30th, and end of the fourth quarter is December 31. But I'm going to go ahead and just do start. Okay, and this is January 1, April 1, July 1, and October 1. Okay. For 1959, then 1960, so on. Okay, and it goes up 203. Our current index is just the integers, the range index. So I'm going to replace the range index directly with these the period timestamp. Okay, so this is not re-indexing. I'm just straight up replacing the index. Okay, now you always have to take caution when you replace an index, because a lot of pandas is powered by the index, and so normally it would line up rows based on these range index. So you really, you know, it's your responsibility to make sure that the index that you are going to use to replace the old index conforms appropriately. Okay, otherwise you're going to run into problems. Okay, so anyway, I've done this. I can check the head, and now each row is a date, and then I got the columns GDP, inflation, and unemployment. All right. I can take this and I can stack it. Okay, and if I stack this, then I get a series. All right, I get 1959, and then so I have a multi-index, and basically each period now has three numbers associated with it: the GDP, the inflation, the unemployment. Okay, and so we can see it hover around and go up or down or things like that. Okay. All right. Here's another thing you can do is after I stack it, I can call reset index. Okay. And so what reset index will do is it will take. Currently, we have these as, this is a multi-index, right? This is a series, it's not a data frame. So one thing that Jupyter does to distinguish data frames from series is that the data frames get printed out in kind of pretty print, or if you hover, like the rows change colors, whereas a series will just print out as kind of like typewriter text, okay? So we can tell this is a series. which means really there's only one column of values, and this stuff over here, this is part of the index. I don't know if you want to do this that often, but you can call something called reset index, okay? And that's going to take the multi-index and basically turn them into columns. So I'm going to get a column for date and a column for item, and it's going to just create kind of a default range index over here, okay? So now I have date is now a column, okay? 1959 January 1, 1959 January 1, so on and so forth. And then the item is a column, okay? And here there was no name here, so it just throws in a 0, okay? So we'll probably have to rename this to something like the value or something like that, okay? And we can see that the index that's produced is just going to be a range index. What will it be? It'll be range index 0. How long is this range index going to be? Okay. So the original data has 203 rows, and because I basically stacked everything up, it's going to be 3 times longer. It's going to have 609. Okay, so this will go from 0 to 609. Okay. So the last row is 608. Okay. I can, if I don't like this, all right, I don't like the column name being 0, I can just call the rename thing and say, and this is a tiny bit annoying, but you have to provide a dictionary, right? So you have to say, for the columns, I want you to rename the one currently 0, and I want you to rename it to value or something like that, okay? And you can do that, right? Okay. Now, if I try to unstack this, it gives me an error. It gives me an error, okay? Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't give me an error. It just, it doesn't, it technically does, okay? It unstacks based on this, right? So it says, okay, you've got 3 things in it, and it basically takes all 3 of these things and just kind of undoes it all, okay? So it probably doesn't work the way we want it to, okay? Unstacking is really designed for having these kind of multi-hierarchical multi-index here, okay? Okay. However, if you don't have a multi-index and you have this kind of thing, and it's specified this way, you can use what's called a pivot table, okay? So even I no longer have a multi-index. Now I could take these things and manually create a multi-index out of this. Okay, kind of like at the beginning here, where I've created the index like this, and I said, basically take this column, but we would specify these columns as the components of the index, but probably better would just be to use the pivot functionality, okay, a pivot table. And you're basically going to say you've got these columns, date and item, all right, and then the value also goes into the pivot table, all right? And so what this will do is it will basically do an unstack even though we don't have a multi or a hierarchical index. So unstack only works when you have the hierarchical index. But here with a pivot table, it will take columns that are not currently part of an index, okay? And it will recognize that, okay, you've got 1959 and you've got item, and it's going to take the date column and try to make a row index out of it, and it's going to take the item column and try to make a column index out of it, and it's going to take the value and populate the cells with the value, all right? So just like everything else, you can read the documentation, and the calls will be the index, okay, which is going to be the row index, and then you specify the columns, which in our case is what's going to become the columns, and then what's going to become the values, right? Column to use to make the new frames columns, the column to use to make the new frame index, right? And then the values to kind of fill in. So So pivot is useful if you have data formatted like this, which is not part of a multi-index, okay? With a multi-index, you can just do stack and unstack, and it's really easy and handy. If you don't have the data in a multi-index, but it exists in some form that can be stacked and unstacked, pivot is what you're going to call on it, okay? If I swap item and date, what will this do? Okay, so item will become the new index, okay? And did I spell that right? I have to spell out columns, okay. Okay, date will become the columns. So I'm gonna have 203 columns, right? Oops. Okay. So now each period becomes a column, and I'm going to have 203 of these things, and each row is the inflation, real GDP, and unemployment. Okay. So depending on what it is that you're how you're trying to plot these things, okay, you might want it in this form or this form, okay, depending on that way. Okay. And again, none of these things. So basically, by doing this, we just regained. We turned the long data back into the original form of data here. Okay. So remember, we created this thing called L data by taking the data, stacking that, and resetting the index. Okay. So I took the data, I stacked it, and I reset the index, and I renamed the column to values. Okay. And that was what we called L data. Here's a little bit of stuff demonstrating the function of group by. Group by is again really great stuff. And so here I've got a data frame with a few categorical variables. Key 1 is A's and B's, and key 2 are the 1s and 2s. Okay, and there's no multi-index. It's just a range index, right? 0 through 4 here. Right. What we can do is we can say group by. In this case, we're going to group by key 1. Okay, and when you do this, it doesn't. And you ask what does it look like? It gives you back this series group by object, which is a little bit of a weird thing, right? But once you have the grouped data, so generally you won't just call group by and end it there. You'll call group by and then call some kind of summary function. So if you say group by mean, do group by and then do dot mean, it's going to give you the mean of all the values of A and B. Okay, so it's going to say, all right, so key 1, as far as so I've selected column data 1. Okay, data 1 group by A. The group of 5, 11, and 9 is 25 divided by 3 is 8.33. And if I take 12 and 8, I get 20 divided by 2. I'm going to get a mean of 10. Okay, so we're taking data 1, DF data 1. We grouped it by key 1, and we're asking for the mean. So it gives us a value back for A and B. And this is a series where the index is A and the index is B. Okay, if you don't specify the column, so here I said DF data 1. But now I didn't specify it, so it's going to do it for both. Okay. So it gives you the mean for data 1 and mean for data 2 for group A and group B. Okay. Same here. So 15 and 0 has a mean of 7.5. 12 and 8 has a mean of 10 for group B. So on and so forth. So if you don't specify it, it'll just do it for all the columns that it can. Okay. It didn't do it for key 2 because it says I don't know how to take the mean. of this. So any column where it is able to take the mean, it'll do it for the entire data frame. Okay. Here you can specify a multi-index. Okay, you can say group by key 1 and key 2, and then do the mean. Okay, so it's going to do the mean of all the A1s, the mean of A2s, and B1s and B2s. And so the only one that's going to really be different is A1 has the mean of 5 and 9, which will be 7, and 11, 16, which will be something else here. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, DF1. We specified we only wanted it for column 1. Okay, the 7 there. All right, and again, so if you did a group by and you specified kind of this multi-index thing, then you can take the result and unstack them as well. Okay, and you get this. Okay. Here, here's our data frame here. You can give it an index that's not even part of the data frame, right? So maybe somewhere else you know that you've got things that correspond to Ohio and California and things like that, or you've got years or something. You can group by these indexes or these arrays that aren't even part of the data frame. It's going to, as long as they're of the correct length, okay? So if the original data frame has 5 entries in it, as long as these things that you're grouping by have 5 entries in them, you can say group by this thing. This is not even part of it, okay? It's basically, you know, you can think of it as kind of pasting these columns to the data frame and then running the group by operation, but you don't have to actually call the command to like concatenate that column to the data set or join it. And so here now we can say, okay, we're going to group the Ohio 2005s and the California 2006 or whatever to this thing and run the group by there. Okay. You can just, I think we straight up did this, but you can just also group by multiple things and call for this kind of stuff, right? So mean will take the columns for the things. The size will just count up how many things these things exist. Okay, and then lastly, let me just kind of show you here. So here's our data frame. You can run through, okay, a group by, and then you can iterate over it, right? So once you have a group by, you can unpack, okay, you can run a for loop and unpack the grouping, okay, which will be in our case, we can see what it does, right? So here I'm going to print out just each thing. We're going to unpack the name, the group, and then we're going to do group.mean, okay? So look what happens. So first it prints out the name, A, and then the group, basically it's filtered out for key 1, all the rows that have key 1 is A, okay? And then I say group mean, and it prints out the means of these things, data 1, data 2, okay? And then it goes to name B, and then the group information is basically the data frame with the rows B, okay? Here you can do it for key 2, and you can do names and keys and things like that, and you get something like that as well. And here, interestingly, I did group.sum, and it is able to do a sum on text. And so when you sum 1, 1, and 1, you get 1, 1, 1, like that, as letters summed together, or just kind of added together. All right, we'll wrap up there. Again, I encourage you guys to do the data camp projects as a good way to get practice for the midterm exams. All right, see you guys on Wednesday.